Got it. There we go.
Good morning, everyone. It's Lee Henson here, president and founder of Agile, and it's time for today's episode of the Daily Stand-Up. So without any further ado, let's get started. Today, I shouldn't have to give an introduction for this guy. This has to be one of my favorite Agile celebrities, the author of many Agile books, one of the more prolific Agile experts in the industry, Mike Cohn. I am so glad to have you with me. How are things going, Mike?
Wow, thank you, Lee. Things are going well. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy you are here. There's lots of energy right now that's going on in the Agile community. And I'll tell you what, it's for good cause, because I think a lot of people, and I want to call this the re-revolution. And let me explain what I mean by that. In the early days of Agile, you had all the different facets. You had people who were joining the XP brigade and the Scrum brigade and this brigade. And now I'm sort of seeing the same revolution happen again, except for this time it's with SAFe or with LESS or with all these other different tickets to try to figure out how to scale Agile. And my answer from the very beginning has been, if you did Agile correct to begin with, you wouldn't be fighting yourself trying to figure out how to scale now, right?
I'd agree with that. Yep.
But with that being said, I had a couple of questions. So the first question that's been on everybody's mind that I think you're the perfect person to answer is, what are the top 2 or 3 challenges that you see today in the industry that organizations are struggling with when they try to embrace Agile?
I think the biggest one is just management not being willing to do the hard parts that they need to do. Everybody thinks it's like changing our health insurance provider. We just sign up with somebody new and it magically happens. And there's a lot of things that management needs to do to make it happen. And if they don't, what happens is we get a little bit better, but then we get sucked back into looking the way the organization does. I always feel like I just call it organizational gravity. And there's a reason your organization looks the way it does, right? It's the different people, the history, whatever it is, all that's forced an organization to look a certain way. And if we don't kind of achieve a certain escape velocity, we're going to get pulled back to looking the exact same way. And a lot of achieving that comes from management being supportive of this. I look at the most successful and the least successful transitions I've been in, and the most successful are the ones where management was very strong in support of a change. And they often not always had to do a whole lot, but they had to speak out in support of it and be there to say, yep, we're doing this. We're not going to let you just wait it out. And in 3 months, you can sabotage it. We'll roll back. They were supportive and did what needed to do to make it happen.
It's funny you should bring. Yeah, it's funny you should bring that up. No, I was just saying, it's funny you should bring that up because I had something similar happen. I was in an organization and leadership brought me in and they said, we're desperate for change. That's why we're bringing you in. I'm like, great. They say, now what we want you to do is we want you to agilify what we're doing. If you could just put some Scrum dust on it or agilify it. We don't want to change what we're doing, but we just want to make it Agile. So I can totally relate. What else were you going to add? Do you have another one?
Yeah, the other one I was going to add is just, it seems like there's a lack of good product owners in the world. And there's plenty of good Scrum Masters out there. And I don't normally go to an organization and say, who's your Scrum Master? And they all look at each other. But all too often I'll say, who's your product owner? And they'll disagree. Yeah. Or they just like, I don't know. I think it's this person. Or they might agree, but it's the super big cheese vice president that has an hour a year to devote to the project, right? And there's just this feeling that we can be Agile without really putting somebody in charge of figuring out what the product is and prioritizing for us. And that's just such an important role. I mean, you can get a great team, but they're going in the wrong direction if we don't have a good product owner. So that'd be my number 2.
I agree. I think, like you said, though, there's often no one to steer the ship. I find the ship sailing just aimlessly wherever it's going, and nobody's there to give them any kind of direction with regard to the product or the vision, for that matter, where they're trying to go and what they're trying to achieve.
That's an interesting thought, though. And I got in trouble about this. I blogged about this maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, where I said, why are we comfortable kind of spreading the architect role across the team? Let the team figure out the architecture. We don't need an architect. We're pretty comfortable with that. A lot of teams are, but we're not comfortable saying, let's spread the product ownership role across everybody, right? Let's make it a collective role. We just figured out together. And I just kind of posed this as a question because I was noticing it, that we aren't comfortable with that. And I just asked why. And I got really kind of attacked on my blog. People like, I spent 2 years becoming a product owner and now you're trying to tell me it should be desegregated. And it's like, no, I'm just raising a question, right? Why are we comfortable taking one role and spreading it across everybody and not the other role? I just wanted to know what the difference was.
I didn't think I was going to go in this direction, but I am, because I love where you're taking it. one of the things that I got roasted for on my blog, funny enough, is I came up with a concept probably back in 2011, where I said, if you treat the product owner like someone who is the shaman who sits on a mountaintop and just receives a revelation about what the product should be, and everyone has to climb to the top of the mountain to get the information, you're never going to get anywhere and be successful.
Right.
That they need a supporting cast. And I called it the Po Ba Fa Ta. The product owner, business analyst, functional analyst, and technical analyst, where the technical analyst would provide information on behalf of the team regarding architecture and infrastructure. The functional analyst would provide strategic direction. And that was often that VP who thought they were the product owner, who wanted to give some technical guide or some strategic guidance. And then the business analyst who had a thumb on the pulse of the consumer. It was still ultimately the product owner's decision, and it wasn't by committee. It was just they had this consultation group that they could lean on to get the information that they needed. Because like you said, I find product owners today dividing their time across 4 or 5 different products at a time, not honoring WIP. And what winds up happening is they say, okay, I need you to spend 64% of your time on this product, 31% of your time on this product, 58% of your time on that product, and 26% of your time on that product. Because when you add that together, that equals 100% of your time, Mike.
Yep.
That's Common Core math. But
I had a team that did exactly that. It was the database manager for a department, and he had his people allocated to the 5% level. And I did the math on it. I was like, I think it was like 38 minutes was 5% of your day or something. It was like 28 minutes. I was like, do you really think people are looking at their watch going, ding, my 28 minutes are up, right? I have to move on.
Now. Okay.
It's like, well, maybe it's a guideline, but I want them spending 5% on that project, not 10. And it's like, oh man, dude, you can't do this to your people, right? And that was one of the changes we made there that helped. That particular team never got really good with Agile, but they did get a lot better at stopping the excessive multitasking. And that was some pretty big benefits for them, even though they never really got the hang of Agile. They were still a little bit kind of like a phased waterfallish approach. They did get to iterations, but like 3-month iterations, but they benefited just by getting the less multitasking in place.
Okay, you said another word that struck my interest here, hit a chord. You talked about phased waterfall for a second. One of the things that I often bring up when I'm teaching a CSM class or a CSPO class, one of the things that I talk about is when you first start doing Agile, what you're really doing is miniature waterfalls. You're just taking 3 or 4 features or 3 or 4 small chunks, and you're putting those into a time box sprint, and you're still doing all of the implementation, the research. You're doing everything that you normally would do. You're just doing it for a smaller number of features. And then eventually you'll become more lean and more efficient and be able to, wear the Agile t-shirt. But it's just one of those things where I feel like a lot of people are over complicating something that could be very simple if they just looked at it in an iterative approach.
Well, there's a lot of appeal to a hypothetical waterfall, right? I mean, face it, we got one brain and 2 hands, right? I can't do design and code at the same time, right? I do one thing, then I go on to the another, but I want to have really small cycles between those things. One of the things I miss from being able to go to physically visit clients is I used to take some of my clients to lunch at a restaurant called Jimmy John's. I don't know if you know. Jimmy John's, right? Well, and their motto is freaky fast, and they truly are freaky fast. I'll go to the one near my home, and there'll be sometimes the line out the door, meaning maybe 15 people in line. It's just a sandwich shop. Most places, if I go and there's 15 people in line, I leave. I was like, I'm not going to wait that long. 15 people at Jimmy John's is like 4 minutes, right? Yeah. And I wait. And they're freaky fast, but I've taken teams there just to watch how they work, because what they do, I get up to the front, I order a sandwich. I always get a Italian nightclub lettuce wrap is what it's called. And as soon as I say lettuce wrap, somebody's got their hands hovering over the bread or the lettuce. I say lettuce wrap, that person grabs the lettuce. The next person has their hands hovering over the meat. What meat am I going to order? And they have all their meat kind of prearranged, right? The right amount of meat per sandwich. And when I say Italian nightclub, he grabs a slab of Italian deli meats. The next person has their hands hovering over the vegetables. And so 3 or 4 people, hopefully they're washing their hands, but 3 or 4 people touch my sandwich, and I get it extremely quickly, as opposed to the place where, I don't know, I go to the place and I'm like talking to the cook for 5 minutes while they're making my sandwich, right? But I take teams there and just like, look, watch them work, watch how they overlap. That's what we're going to do, right? And you're right, we don't do that at first. That's where short iterations force us to overlap. But if we don't try short iterations, we can go a long time without ever trying to overlap our work.
And that leads me to the second question. The second question I have for you is, what is the future of Agile looking like right now? I mean, are we still iterating even? I mean, I know a lot of people are saying that, it's time for an Agile reboot or an Agile 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever you want to call it, or now scaling is the new big thing. I'm not buying it, but I just want to get your perspective. Where do you think we are?
I think it's people get bored and they want the next one, right? It's like,
Yeah.
we rebooted the Batman series, right? We're going to have like 3 new Batman movies. And, when are we going to reboot Star Wars? And we don't need to do that. It's a very small set of principles. It's things like overlapping work, communicating a lot, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And those principles aren't really going to change. And what I think is kind of back to what Fred Brooks wrote about probably 40 years ago now, where he said there's no silver bullet that's going to 10x development. It's all just going to be incremental changes. I look at a team that I worked with in would have been 1992. I'd been just kind of starting to do some kind of Agile stuff there. And by 94, 95, we were actually calling it Scrum and doing Scrum there. And that team was phenomenal for the time, absolutely phenomenal. We were doing automated tests, nightly builds, things like that. Man, that team sucks compared to today in terms of the amount of work they were doing and putting out. And it has to do with the improvement in tools and technologies and understanding about how to do these things. And I think it's just going to be a continuation of that. I mean, we're at the point now where I remember going to conferences and people are like, I can't possibly run all my tests in a night. These days we can. And so it's a matter of incrementally improving what we already know. So I don't really think there is like an Agile 2.0 or an Agile 3.0 coming. It's just a continued refinement on what we do. And I like that because for years have said, I want Agile to go away. I want it to go away as a thing we talk about. It wins. It's just what we do. Of course, we're Agile. We don't need to talk about it. I used to use the example of like, objects won. And of course we do object-oriented development. Well, there's functional programming and other models, but objects basically beat out structured programming. And, nobody had to say, I'm going to the OO meeting anymore, right? It was just what you did. And I want Agile to be the same way. It just wins. It's what we do. And we talk about how do I get faster, but we don't really talk about Agile anymore. It's won, it's over.
Right. And I agree. I've been struggling with this a lot with organizations. I tend to deal with some of the larger companies. So I'm not going to go with any names, but there's a large entertainment company that I've been doing a lot of business with. And it's sometimes a struggle to get them to understand that it's iterative, but it doesn't. And we're looking for Kaizen. We're looking for continuous improvement, but it doesn't mean that we have to reinvent the mousetrap. Oh. No, but it doesn't mean
that's a bad analogy with certain entertainment companies.
With certain companies, that's a bad analogy, right? But it's just. But I think you see where I'm going with this, right? Yeah. It's just it's so easy for people to fall into the trap of thinking that it always has to be new, bigger, better, faster, stronger. And while we can, work our muscles and improve, like you said, I think sometimes we just get stuck on it has to be something different when it really doesn't. Let's just do what we're doing and do it right.
I've been trying to turn my daughter on to some of the, great classic music. She's 20 and trying to turn her on some great classic stuff. And I think part of it is she just doesn't want to hear what somebody's singing about when she knows they're not going to have the new album out, right? They're right. Creedence Clearwater, they're buried and gone, not going to have a new album out. And even though something they're singing about might still be relevant, right? Some song could still be relevant in meaning, but there's something about it that it's not new, right? You're not hearing this when it first came out and it's kind of taking over the world and all your friends are hearing the same song. And so she likes the new stuff, even though it's like, oh my God, this old stuff is so much better. Mm-hmm. And in the right mood, I can get her to acknowledge that a lot of the old stuff is great, but she still wants the new thing. And that's just something as simple as music. So we're always looking for the new thing. And I just don't think there needs to be. I think the challenge these days is not what's new, what's shiny, what should I be doing? It's figuring out how to make Agile good for me and my company. All right, come on, 2021, we know Agile works. What we don't know is what does successful Agile look like in this company or that company? That's what we have to figure out.
Right. No, I agree. And I always try to keep this to 3 questions. And thank goodness they're not, what did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? And do you have any impediments? But the third question I have for you, and the last one, is if we could do something to leverage Agile to make the world a better place, and I ask everybody I talk to this same question, what would you say is a good move going forward? If you had someone who just said, hey, I'm trying my best to do Agile the way that I know how to do, but I want to leverage it to do something to leave a lasting impact, to leave an impression on our world. And this isn't lip service. Some of the stuff that you've done has been phenomenal for the Agile community and has left that legacy, that lasting
impact.
Thank you. So with that being said, what advice would you give to a new Agilist who wants to leave a lasting impact?
I I think this will work, but here's my answer. For me, it's getting to people young. And I don't mean, when they're 27 and they're, a couple years into their career. I'm talking about like the 9-year-olds, right? And some of the stuff that I've seen with teachers using this in schools is really interesting, because I'll admit this. This is like years ago, but I remember teaching a class. Somebody asked me a question and I'm about to answer, but before I can answer, somebody in class yells out an answer that's better than mine. Because I'm very much grew up in a kind of command and control waterfall-ish era, right? It's kind of how I came of age in the workforce in the 80s and then in the 90s. And so it's kind of a little bit ingrained in there. And so what's going to happen when these little 9-year-olds have been doing Scrum their whole lives, right? And they're managing. I think it's going to be a completely different world. But, we've got to wait for a generation or two of management to die off or retire before, those 9-year-olds are older and in charge. But I think getting to people when they're young and just kind of instilling this in how they work is going to be huge. My older daughter started a job a couple of years ago, and the first thing her company did was kind of a company training. It included Agile. And so they were looking at, here's how you do it. She's an auditor. And it was like, here's how you do Agile and audits. And this was something they were giving all these like 22 and 23-year-old first year auditors. And so even getting younger, I think is going to be a huge part of this. So it's kind of where I'd go. Not everybody has the access to, go volunteer and teach this at school or something, but I think there's a huge impact.
I agree. And I think for me, it's, hence the name of my company, Agile Dad. I started out doing this at home with my kids, right? And from a very young age, we set up these glass boards with columns. We'd set whip limits. You could only have so many things in progress at any time. We had sticky notes. You'd move them across the board, and they earned allowance based on how many items they moved across. I mean, it was perfect. And people just, when I told people this, they're like, you are just crazy. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. The values that they're learning by doing this at a very young age are going to be something that they take with them their entire life. Yeah. And now 2 of my children own their own charities where they're full blown running it, and they have jobs. So it's just really interesting to see. I'd have taken those tools and elevated through. And Mike, I couldn't have asked for any better advice. I think that was a perfect answer, my friend.
Thanks. My daughter did the same. Thank you. My daughter did the same thing. She and my wife were fighting, and my wife, her mom, is the type that, I have to nag my kid to do homework. And my older daughter is not the type you have to nag. She is literally the one who, when a substitute teacher was there, she told the teacher, we were supposed to have a pop quiz today or something, right? It's like, I would have beat her up as a little kid in the class, but that's my daughter. She's really anal about that stuff. So she and mom were fighting about the homework. My daughter put up a Kanban. And so she had a row for reading, a row for math, and, the different days of the week, and move stuff in process. And they stopped fighting. And so that was something my daughter did, I think at age 7, just on her own, put that up as a way to, Mom, if you see my homework on the wall and you see it making progress, will you stop nagging me? And it worked, right? And it's kind of stuck with her to what she does now. So,
well, I hope we get to the point, Mike, where we can do in-person stuff again, because I'd love to treat you to lunch and have just more words with you, because I could sit here and talk with you all day. Mike, I know how valuable your time is. And I just want to say once again, how much I appreciate you carving out some time to spend with us.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. If you have any questions about this podcast and you want to reach out to Mike, you can reach out to me and I'll get you in touch with Mike, or you can reach out to Mike directly at
mountaingoatsoftware.com. It's the best
site. There you go. And Mountain Goat is awesome. If you haven't gotten your planning poker cards, go get some. They're totally cool. So I don't know if this story's true or not, but I tell people when I get the cards with the different goats on the back, I don't know if you remember that series, but I tell them that each of the different goats represents one of the different roles. So they have one goat that's laying down. I call it the lazy developer mountain goat.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They have one where it's staring at the camera like this. I'm like, that's your QA mountain goat, but it's just funny because I give them all little names. And it just adds something. It adds another dimension to what you've done. And I know that it probably wasn't intentional, but everyone who takes my class and sees that just thinks it's amazing and fun.
I like that. I'll have to take a look at my photos again, see what we have on there.
There you go. It's pretty cool. But Mike, thank you again. And once again, as always, we tell you, as we tell everyone else, stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.